Hi, I'm Governor Dan Malloy. I want to talk about a problem that we have here in Connecticut, along with 49 other states in our nation. After all, we've lost 500,000 citizens in the last 15 years to opioid abuse. Ultimately, what we have to understand is we're losing too many of our young people, our citizens of all ages, and we have to fight this very big problem.
They are the faces in the crowd. You may pass them on the street, sit beside them at the park.
Their pain, not always obvious, but they have lost a great deal. Loved ones who have slipped away, or they've watched their own lives crumble under the weight of addiction.
And they are desperate for answers, peace of mind, a hopeful tomorrow.
They're the faces of the opioid crisis.
The Faces of the Opioid Crisis, brought to you by Wheeler's Addiction Center of Excellence. Wheeler, innovative care, positive change.
It's a drug epidemic the Surgeon General calls the most pressing public health crisis of our time. Thanks for joining us for this important program. I'm Caitlin Gosley.
And I'm Lorenzo Hall. Over the next half hour, we will bring you close-ups, portraits of pain, families devastated by a drug habit that often starts with prescription painkillers and leads to heroin addiction.
The powerful influence of opioids is propelling community leaders and health professionals to sound the alarm. But only recovering addicts can truly describe what our society is up against.
If you had told me in high school that I would end up, using heroin or other opioids, I would fall off my seat in shock. For me, it all changed in November of 2005. I was 23 years old and I was in a really bad car accident.
Suffering from a back injury, her doctors started her on the pain medication Oxycontin, an opioid.
You think, oh, it's from a pharmacy, it's safe, it's FDA approved, my doctor's recommending this.
Over time, Sarah's body built up a tolerance to the drug.
Your brain chemistry changes.
When prescription refills ran out, buying pills on the black market came next.
It very quickly becomes your body needing to be dependent on opioids just to feel normal, just to get through your day.
When no more pills were available, withdrawal symptoms kicked in, turning to heroin as an act of desperation, a means to deal with the overwhelming cravings.
Your blood inside feels like it's cold, but your skin is hot and clammy. Imagine like the worst flu-like symptoms you've ever had, times 100, your whole body aches.
Feelings of desperation, Matthew DeLuca says he knows all too well.
I would go to sleep every single night, crying myself to sleep, thinking about what I had to do that day in order to get my drugs.
An addiction that for Matthew started as so-called fun and games in high school.
I was a good athlete, very involved with the school sports, so there was that mentality of, play hard, party harder.
Before he knew it, heroin was part of the mix, and fun and games progressing to an urgency to get clean.
I needed some sort of intervention to happen because I was dying. I was about 135 pounds. I was literally dripping away. I was dying.
Opioid addiction, like Sarah's and Matthew's, is classified by the U.S. Surgeon General as a chronic brain disease, similar to heart disease or diabetes, a disease top health experts emphasize cannot be cured, but can be managed with the right individual treatment.
Entering recovery is the scariest and hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but it's very, very much possible.
For Sarah, a combination of inpatient and outpatient programs and medication-assisted treatment was the path that led her to the life she knows today.
My life today is 1,000,000 times better than it ever was using.
A sentiment shared by Matthew, who says his path to recovery came when he decided to surrender fully.
I'm never going to be normal ever again. I will always be an addict, something that I will always deal with in my life. And when I realized that and when I actually truly accepted that is when my life started to change.
A change he is still in awe of today, 3 years into sobriety.
It kind of blossomed into, a beautiful recovery, and a life that is honestly beyond my wildest dreams.
Matt and Sarah sharing their stories because so many others don't get the chance to escape opioids' tight grip. Heroin laced with fentanyl, a highly potent painkiller, now popping up on the black market and causing overdose deaths to skyrocket across the state in every size community. In 2016, 917 people in Connecticut died from accidental drug overdoses, a dramatic jump compared to just under 500 3 years ago. We want to take you in to a closer look at how those numbers are really impacting communities, both large and small. We have a look here at Enfield, 15 deaths. Down in Manchester, another 17. If we go to the southeast corner of the state in Norwich, another 24 deaths. Up in Torrington, 13 of those deaths. And over in Bristol, a whopping 34 deaths.
Yeah, and of course, Caitlin, in some of the state's biggest cities, naturally with those larger populations, the numbers go up significantly. And when you look at these numbers, it really is heartbreaking. For instance, in Bridgeport, you have 48 overdose deaths. Then in New Haven, 63. Working our way up now to Waterbury, 32 overdose deaths. And then New Britain, 34. And Hartford, the city of Hartford, 61 overdose deaths. And again, like we said, these large numbers, looking at these numbers in some of the bigger cities really is heartbreaking. And the capital city alone has struggled for decades to keep heroin off its streets, but the opioid epidemic brings a dangerous new element. Along Park Street in Hartford, it seems there is no shortage of activity.
More has happened before 9 o'clock than most people see throughout the day.
A lot of it, drug activity.
All right.
But in the midst of it all,
You'll catch the van on Albany at 11 o'clock.
is one guy trying to get some people to stop.
Yeah, I'll drop you off over there.
Mark Jenkins is founder of the Greater Hartford Harm Reduction Coalition.
We make sure we have Narcan.
He's been out on these streets for decades in city neighborhoods where drug use is rampant.
As long as there's a market, there'll be, that activity. You need anything, Ralph?
Jenkins is trying to develop relationships with those toughest to reach
She's gonna call back.
so they can get the right help and hopefully call it quits.
We have services. People can't always access those services, or they may fall through the cracks, if you will.
Jenkins tells us for decades it was just crack cocaine, but now heroin appears to be the drug of choice, leading to an increasing number of problems for law enforcement as well.
The Orange Street group.
A local
operated
street gang was
right
recently
here
busted
where
in the
we are.
Parkville neighborhood where investigators seized more than 1,000 bags of heroin. Just weeks before that, more than 12,000 bags of heroin were discovered in 2 drug raids in the city.
This is a safe crack kit.
Jenkins tells us this problem with heroin isn't new for Hartford. However, what is new are the people showing up on these streets.
You see soccer moms, pull up on the block and they gotta have it.
For that reason, Jenkins believes there's also been a change in the response to this problem.
I hate to say it or don't want to be the bad guy if no one else will say it. The reason it's an epidemic is because white people began to die. Hey!
Jenkins says the inner city isn't benefiting enough based on what he's seen from his experience helping people who are addicted.
Next week I'll celebrate 20 years clean.
And also dealing with his own addiction to cocaine and heroin. On these same streets, coincidentally, the right person was there to help when he was ready to quit, which is why Jenkins says he wants to do the same for others.
As long as there's people out there, I pray that I have the energy and the ability to be there to help.
And you see there, Jenkins has one of the toughest jobs in the capital city, along with emergency room workers. This drug epidemic is straining many hospitals in Hartford. Get this, the emergency department in St. Francis handled 30% more overdoses in 2016 compared to the previous year.
And over at Midstate Medical Center in Meriden, an addiction psychiatrist tells us it's a difficult time for medical personnel.
Very stressful for the staff because usually it is a young person who is in relatively good health could be dying, and some of them had to be intubated, and many of them are not cooperative, so there is a lot of stress for the staff.
The medical staff there thankful for new laws that allow for expanded use of Narcan, the overdose reversal drug, meaning certified pharmacists now can train customers to use Narcan.
Yeah, and there's a lot of community outreach now to train family and friends of addicts so they too can administer Narcan in the hopes of saving lives.
Coming up, policing the opioid crisis in the quiet town of Enfield.
You see an increase in burglaries, car thefts, armed robberies.
Also, an Ellington dad forced to cope with the unimaginable.
It's like you got hit by a bus. Heroin? We don't know anybody who does heroin. We don't know who does that.
The personal pain of families impacted by the opioid crisis translates to serious business for law enforcement.
Take the quiet town of Enfield, where the police chief there calls this crisis overwhelming. Enfield police have been feeling the effects of the heroin crisis for several years now.
You see an increase in burglaries, car thefts, armed robberies. And it's not people trying to take thousands of dollars. Maybe they rob a convenience store for a few $100.
Crimes Chief Cervaza says are commonly linked to people addicted to heroin, most often with no prior criminal record. Many with common threads.
The profile we're seeing is these are, they tend to be right now white males, under 30 years old. A lot of them gainfully employed. A lot of them were successful in school and social and everything. And then a lot of them had accidents, car accidents, work-related accidents. They got prescribed painkillers and they got addicted to it. And when the painkillers aren't coming their way anymore, they turn to the heroin.
An addiction, Chief says, is taking the lives of too many people.
25 people that died. So if we had 25 homicides in the town of Enfield in 2 years, I can tell you the uproar, the attention it would be getting would be totally different.
He says those 25 deaths could have easily been doubled if not for the overdose reversal drug Narcan.
There's probably another 40 or 50 people who would have died if not for the EMS intervention. Those numbers are just frightening.
Heroin, dangerous on its own, in some cases is being mixed with other substances like fentanyl, making it cheaper to produce, giving more profit to the dealer. Fentanyl is a man-made pain medication the CDC lists as 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine.
Heroin isn't like it was 36 years ago when I started. Yeah. The potency of this thing is tremendous.
Sparking him to launch the North Central Regional Narcotics Task Force.
I can't think of a more pressing problem right now for law enforcement than this opiate crisis.
Cervaza says the task force is a cooperative effort with neighboring East Windsor, Suffield, and Windsor Locks in order to aggressively pursue those selling heroin in these communities.
If we don't exist to protect human life, everything else police departments do are secondary.
But says this effort is just one part of a much bigger equation.
It's not their fault at this point. They're addicted. And I don't have the resources when a person comes to me and says, I'm an addicted heroin, to pick up the phone and place them in a facility that can deal with that. If you're hooked on this poison, you're going to end up in jail or dead. And we want to give a third option, which is rehab. We want people to get better.
In March, Enfield's police captain Fred Hall delivered grim testimony at the state capitol, telling the Judiciary Committee the town responded to 13 overdoses during a 12-day period, all but one person saved by Narcan.
And law enforcement also working to track the flow of opioids into our state. A narcotics investigator tells us fentanyl is often smuggled in over Canada's rural border, with heroin coming in from Boston and Providence. And some of the purest and most potent heroin gets into our state from New York City, which is why police in Stamford are focused on the highways as well as trains. Stamford police frequently execute sting operations near the Stamford train station, where heroin and other drugs often make their way into Connecticut, according to Captain Richard Conklin.
We'll have different sources, intel into people that are making this trip via train, via car, back and forth to New York City, where they're getting the diacetylmorphine or heroin pre-packaged, pre-stamped, and bringing it back for sale here. One of the reasons is it's much cheaper in New York.
In most cases, heroin coming in from New York is also extremely powerful, says Captain Conklin, especially if combined with other drugs. Because the drug is much more potent at this point, you're dealing with people who are overdosing a bit easier now, right?
Yes, and much more so with the fentanyl. You know, another thing with the illicit drug market, there's no FDA control, there's no government control. So you don't know the potency. You could get one batch that comes in 65% pure. Next week, you're getting a batch that comes in 92% pure.
Captain Conklin says, ironically, a lot of people also overdose because of the life-saving drug Narcan.
We've seen a number of addicts that you might be able to persuade to get off the drug, and now they're saying, well, if I get in deep, just give me the Narcan, and it'll save me.
The market in general, it seems like it's consistently changing. You got a lot of moving parts. How do you guys keep on top of it?
Well, you know, we keep on top of it very much source-based. You know, we have a lot of sources. We confer and work with many other law enforcement agencies.
And Captain Conklin goes on to say this really is a community effort. They need your help reporting those suspected dealers so investigators can try and put them on their radar.
Well, Lorenzo, police are also addressing this opioid crisis from their home base with these drop boxes. They are now placed in 75 headquarters across the state.
Again, it appears to be working. Get this, in 2016, nearly 34,000 pounds of medication collected.
Well, there's also these are at-home medication disposal bags. 80,000 of them were donated across the state back in December 2016.
Yeah, we should give a big kudos to Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals, which donated them to roughly 600 pharmacies statewide. Coming up, a Connecticut mom shares her pain.
You may smile and stand straight, but you will feel drained and crooked for the rest of your life.
And an open letter about losing her son, Nick, to heroin. And we want to take time now to salute community leaders and health professionals facing the future by bringing the opioid crisis into the national spotlight. Connecticut Democratic Congresswoman Elizabeth Esty is applauding President Trump's call for a commission to combat the epidemic, saying in part, everywhere I go in Connecticut, I meet people whose families have been destroyed by addiction. We need a comprehensive strategy to address this crisis.
Tonight, we also want to recognize the parents who have lived the pain and are working to end this crisis. Joining us now, Jennifer Kelly of Tolland, whose daughter Justice remains in a vegetative state since a heroin overdose combined with health complications caused a brain injury. Jennifer, you testified in Washington last year before the bipartisan panel addressing the epidemic. What was your message?
Well, my message was pretty simple. We need the funding. Connecticut needs the funding to fight this epidemic. We need quality treatment facilities and better programs, not just for the substance abuser, but for the families as well. We also need to eliminate the stigma of addiction so that we can better educate our youth. Addiction is not a moral failing. It is a disease, and it needs to be treated as such.
Well, we appreciate you sharing that beautiful message, and a powerful one at that. And we know you have an initiative coming up to continue your work out in the community. Tell us about that.
Yes, I'm proud to announce a new program being offered through the Manchester Hope Initiative. It's called Hope for Loved Ones. Our aim is to provide support and resources for the families that have been affected by addiction. Our program will meet the second Wednesday of the month, starting in May, and it will be held at the Manchester Police Department. If families would like further information, they can email manchestercthope@gmail.com.
Jennifer, we thank you so much for sharing that powerful message and for all of your work out in the community. We salute you, and like other parents, like John Lally of Ellington, father of late Tim Lally.
And this is one of our earliest pictures. He's still in T-balls.
A young, happy-go-lucky boy.
You know, just a day in the life, just a normal kid. You know, just another picture I love.
Tim Lally grew up in this Ellington home, a usual gathering spot for family, once filled with laughter. Now sits a bit quieter.
We have a big family and hanging out with his uncles and debating between the Red Sox and the Yankees. You know, he would love that. And he was a big Red Sox fan.
In his junior year of high school, Tim's parents noticed the beginnings of his decade-long struggle with depression and anxiety.
He started having trouble in school and hanging out less with his friends and staying in his room a lot.
Tim's doctors and parents struggled to find a medication and therapy that worked. After years of trying, the Lalleys faced a whole new challenge.
In hindsight now, we see things a little clearer, but we found things in his room which parents should know. Lots of little foil packets, little burn marks in the middle. And he convinced us, and maybe we wanted to believe, that it was marijuana residue, that he was just smoking the last of it. And turns out that he was smoking heroin.
A heroin addiction that started with prescription pain medication. Tim's parents, still unsure of where those drugs came from, they believe Tim first smoked the crushed pills. But as his dependency grew, his using shifted.
Heroin is cheaper and unfortunately easier to get than prescription pain pills. And at some point, we don't know when, he switched to injecting with needles of heroin.
A shift stunning John.
It's like he got hit by a bus. It's like, whoa, it's like, where did this come from? It's like, this can't be happening. Heroin? We don't know anybody who does heroin. We know who does that, you know?
A shock that quickly turned into desperation to find Tim in open bed at a treatment facility.
Call back every day for 7, 10 days the second time it took us. How many people in addiction have that kind of motivation? Luckily he had us. We sat with him every morning. Call again, call again, call again.
For 2 years, Tim's parents sought out all the professional support they could think of.
Tim went to psychiatrists, psychotherapists, psychiatric APRNs. He did intensive outpatient programs. He did inpatient rehab.
But last January, Tim's third relapse turned out to be his last.
That's my favorite picture of Tim. I love to see that smile on his face.
John's mission now to break the stigma that comes with addiction.
Struggling with anxiety, depression, and addiction and relapse, Tim felt he was a loser. And I think he gave up asking for help because he was embarrassed and shamed.
Sharing his son's story to lend support to other parents of the opioid crisis.
Like if your kid had diabetes or heart problems or cancer, addiction changes your brain, actually physically and chemically. So I want parents to hear that this is not your fault. You didn't raise your child to become an addict, and you didn't cause him to be an addict, and you didn't cause it to continue. You did the best you could.
Well, parents, of course, still heartbroken, yet still committed to public awareness.
Yeah, which is very important. And, you know, this crisis is also bringing about change. Connecticut-based Aetna joining Cigna and Anthem insurance providers in removing barriers to treat opioid addiction by speeding up how doctors get essential medications for withdrawal symptoms into the hands of their patients. Insurance Commissioner Katie Wade applauds the change in policy.
We need to destigmatize opioid addiction. It's a public health crisis, it's a chronic disease, and we need to view it that way.
Commissioner Wade goes on to say that she's telling everyone that it is important to understand your rights to coverage, and the state's insurance department can help.
Another major change to the way doctors prescribe opioids, thanks to state laws enacted last year, limiting prescriptions to 7 days. And if chronic pain requires more meds, it will be monitored in medical records. Among advocates leading the charge for change, Guilford mom Sue Kruzek, who lost her oldest son to heroin.
This picture in front of me is Nick. This is your face of addiction.
Sue Kruzek helped push through the limits on prescriptions and recently wrote an open letter to Nick, who died 3.5 years ago. He was just 20 years old. And we'd like to end our program tonight by sharing with you Sue's heartwarming letter to Nick.
Yeah, she eloquently shares the despair so many families are facing right now.
And the letter serves as a reminder that as a society, it's vital we find solutions and move away from this crushing crisis.
There is no name for a parent who lost a child, not widowed, not orphaned. The magnitude of the pain is too large, as parents are not supposed to outlive their children. You focus on your religion because you have to believe that there is a better place, a place where angels play hockey and there is no more struggling and pain. People talk about what's new with their children. You get to repeat the same old stories because that's all you have. Losing a child to addiction means you didn't get to say goodbye. You look for where you went wrong. You look back over the years looking for clues, questioning every decision and everything you said and did not say. You ask all the what ifs, you blame yourself, and you find other mothers just like yourself. You may smile and stand straight, but you will feel drained and crooked for the rest of your life. This is for my beloved angel, Nick. May you rest in paradise, my beautiful angel. Mommy loves you. Signed, Sue Kruzek, forever Nick Kruzek's mom.
Thank you for watching our special presentation on the opioid crisis. My name's John Hitchcock. I'm Vice President and General Manager here for Fox 61. We hope that you'll join us now live on our Facebook page with a team of Fox 61, local health experts, as well as community business leaders are here to answer questions you may have about this growing crisis. We hope that you'll join us now live, and thank you for your support.